The end is near. Not the end of time, don't fear. But after a summer of revelation, I can understand why our minds might jump to that. The end is near of our Revelation sermon series. We have spent the summer reading through and preaching through the apocalyptic book of Revelation. It has been quite an adventure. I won't speak for Elizabeth, but I have very much enjoyed Revelation. Some of the verses, some of the passages have been strange, some of them enlightening, some of them just downright confusing. But it is good for us to address this book. Elizabeth pointed out in one of the Bible studies that we co-taught this summer that our mainline Christian voice has largely been absent from the conversation about Revelation. This is because we might be too intimidated or anxious about this book. But our scholarly, disciplined voice needs to play a role in this conversation. This book has so much to offer modern Christians outside of its use as a doom and gloom book, and we must not set it aside. Before we close this series out, it seems to me that it might be helpful if we did a slight recap of the sermon from last week, just in case, for some strange reason, you were not able to give the sermon last week your full and undivided attention. Elizabeth and I spoke of 6 paintings that John hung in his art gallery called Destruction. We pointed out that these were not paintings depicting the destruction of humans or the world. These were paintings depicting the destruction of death, the destruction of pain, of suffering. In the first 6 paintings of this gallery, God finally defeats death. We are reminded that God has an ultimate plan for us and for creation. These 6 paintings set up the final painting in the gallery, and this painting would be individually titled. It would be called All Things New. Our passage today describes the most hopeful piece of the entirety of John's vision. He sees a new Jerusalem, which descends to fill a void left in the absence of all that God removed. The description of this scene is magnificent. I envision this city descending from the clouds. It would be impossible to directly look at it for all of the light that would radiate from its center. This is a shining, beautiful city. It is an image of profound power, grace, and glory. But as with many parts of John's vision, perhaps this image is a difficult one to grasp, understand, or hold on to. So let us explore the description of this city in hopes to discover what its coming means for God's people. So often when we seek to describe God, it is easier for us with our human language to begin with what we know God is not and to go from there. So let us explore this city first by what it is not. One of the first things that God removes in the description of this city is the sea. It is no more. For John, this was significant on a personal level. He had been exiled to the island of Patmos, and he was separated from the churches to which he wrote by the sea. The removal of this sea meant for him the return of his relationship with the people of his churches. On another level, the removal of the sea symbolizes the removal of chaos and the root of evil. In creation, the sea is moved aside and separated to form the heavens and the earth. In this moment, the sea is overcome again to welcome in a new heavens and a new earth. Also, in John's vision earlier, the first beast, the stand-in for the Roman Empire, rises up from the sea to conquer and subjugate. The removal of the sea is a profound statement of hope, of relief from chaos. Another thing that will not be is tears, death, sorrow, crying, and pain. In this New Jerusalem, all of these things, which keep people from enjoying life to its fullest, shall be wiped away. There's a reason that this passage is so often read at funerals. What better vision for suffering people of hope for the future? God promises that in this New Jerusalem, there will be no more cowardice, faithlessness, fornicators, murderers, and the like. Now, this can easily be seen as exclusionary, judgmental. But Eugene Boring says that this is less of a claim about who will be excluded as it is a call to current listeners. John is saying that these will not be actions that are present in God's just city. This list is a description of life in the city of God, not a limitation on who will be there. Finally, John says that there will no longer be a temple. God is not going to be part of the city, a place where people can come and worship. God is going to be the city. God's presence will be our reality. Everything will be different. This is a true characterization of the end as John sees it throughout his vision. In this passage and in Revelation as a whole, we are not told that God will be there in the end. We are told that God is the end. We will not meet an event at the end. We will meet a person, Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ is the Alpha and the Omega. Jesus Christ is the beginning and is the end. So these are the things that will not be present in God's city. But what are the things that will be there? What will this city be like? John highlights three aspects. First, it is holy. Holiness, or being set apart in a godly way, is a trait that only God gives, and only God does not have to acquire. We only become holy when God makes us holy, when we are in relationship with God. This city gives us great hope for holiness, as God is the entire city. By its descent into the world and by our dwelling in that city, we dwell with God, in complete relationship with God. We become holy in our relationship with the Holy One. Second, the city is new. Changed is the doom of so much of John's vision. The despair we witness with the opening of the seals, the blowing of the trumpets, the pouring out of the bowls, all of these things have been set aside. God is creating a new reality, a redeemed reality, a hope-filled reality. Third, this is a city. In God's new heaven and new earth, people are together in community. We depend upon each other. We cooperate with one another. We recognize that we witness God in the face of one another. It is in the midst of community that we gain a more deep understanding of who God is. So, how does the reading of this city, this holy new city, affect us? How does this influence the lives we live in faith, in the here and the now? There has been a surge in superhero movies over the past decade. And one of my favorite in this series has been the Dark Knight trilogy, featuring Christian Bale as Batman. I don't know if you've seen it. It's a pretty typical Batman series, but it's different in the themes that it conveys. And I was deeply intrigued by one of these themes, conveyed in the last movie in the trilogy, The Dark Knight Rises. In part of this movie, Batman is defeated by the movie's typical villain, Bane. Bane's punishment is not to kill Batman, it is to place him in a unique prison. This prison is basically a big pit a few hundred feet deep, totally open to the air with no chains or restraints. The inmates sit at the bottom of this pit, trapped by a seemingly impossible climb. Bane explains to Batman that this is the worst kind of prison because the prisoners are plagued by hope. They can see their escape just above them. They have no restraints to keep them from reaching it, but they just can't quite climb there. This hope keeps them striving for a goal they will never reach, and they are trapped by their own despair. Bain believes that there can be no true despair without hope to fuel it. For Bain, hope is what destroys people by keeping them trapped, striving for an unreachable goal. When we read John's revelation, it is impossible for us to not sense that despair. The despair John feels as he watches the Roman Empire wage its war of influence upon early Christians. Yet, a vision is revealed to John, a vision of promise for the future, a vision of total change in the status quo. Ultimately, this is a vision of hope. The hope in this vision is similar to the hope of Bain's prisoners. It is a goal that is out of our reach, but unlike the hope that traps those people striving for an unreachable goal, this hope is God's promise. Though we cannot reach it ourselves, God brings it to us. This is a hope that comes down to us, that reaches out for us, that dries our tears and casts out our suffering. This is God's presence with us, full of grace and love and mercy. This is the deepest, truest root of hope. Not only does John's vision offer us hope that God's plans will be fulfilled, it also gives Christians a calling. This calling is wrapped up in God's vision for the future, in the promise of the New Jerusalem. God's holy city is a reality that will come one day, but also a reality toward which God calls us to work. By describing what this new reality will look like and what it will not look like, God is calling us to change our current reality, to align ourselves with God's vision. And God's hope and God's calling are combined in some of the few words that God speaks in all of Revelation, which we find here at its end. God says, "See, I am making all things new. I am making all things new." In this simple phrase, God makes both a promise and a call. God promises that there is hope. The painful reality in which we live will be altered. There is promise for the world and for our very lives. And there is also a call. We are not part of the creation that God will make new. We are not apart from the creation God will make new. God does not say we will be replaced or that creation will be replaced. God does not say, "I am making new things." God says, "I am making all things new." Because we are a part of the creation that God is remaking, we are called to make ourselves new. We are called to be an active part of that remaking. I have to admit that I am a sucker for the Olympics. I love the competition, I love the commitment of the athletes, and I love the stories of their lives. So if you're looking for me for the next 2 weeks, that's what I'm going to be doing. One story in particular has stuck out to me this year. It is the story of one of the members of a unique team. The International Olympic Committee assembled a refugee team for this Olympics, made up totally of people who have been forced to leave their lands because of war or persecution. The German head of the IOC said, "We want to send a message of hope for all of the refugees of the world." One of the refugees on this team embodies this message of hope. Yusra Mardini was a competitive swimmer in Syria when she fled that country in the fall of 2015 at the age of 18. As she fled Syria with her sister in a small boat toward an island off the Greek coast, the boat's engine died. Dead in the water with no land in sight, with many of the passengers unable to swim, Yusra and her sister, a few of those who could swim, got out of the boat into the water and began to push the boat. 3 hours later, this competitive swimmer pushed that boat ashore, giving her and her fellow refugees a chance for a new life. She ended up in Germany almost a month later, and in Rio less than a year after that, competing in the Olympics. Yusra reached out for a hope that she could not see. She pushed toward the hope of a new life in a land free from the war that had engulfed her home. The hope of life in a new land pushed her. It motivated her to strive for that new life. She confronted death in a very real way, both her own and those of her refugees. Rather than allowing that death to conquer her, she used hope and the calling of her talents as a competitive swimmer to overcome. Such is the calling of John's revelation, a message of hope calling Christians to action. John's vision encourages us through a deep sense of hope and out of the gloom of despair. God's promise shines bright. John's vision calls to us to live out God's new reality here and now, to help bring about God's kingdom in this place and in this time. May we witness to God's hope, and may our witness be to change ourselves and to change the world around us. May we be encouraged and challenged by the words of the revelation. And may God be at work in us each and every day, bringing about a new heaven and a new earth, and making all things new. Amen.